Welcome to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. I got a special one for you. Kevin Brown. He's a seasoned agency ad man. He was in the industry selling, been a part of big broadcast companies, and found after that time, it's so critical to do something meaningful with your life. And so he started a company 17 years ago with his wife. It was a powerhouse. We get on that later. And he worked with companies, small businesses, to really be found, be known in the barter space. And so it's so important to realize that although the industry slightly is different, the narrative is the same. What it's like to put the blood, sweat, and years into a small business and eventually sell it to hopefully the right buyer that creates new opportunity for you as a person and for the company and the people you employ. That's what we went through today. That's what we're going to share. Kevin drops so much sage advice, you can't miss a minute. So let's dive in. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You have a tapestry of a career and background. Help us get to know you a little bit.
Well, I spent a lot of years in advertising and marketing in New York City. Um, after living in the city for a long time, moving to the suburbs and having a family. After a lot of years and having climbed the ladder and done well financially, I was not really seeing my kids grow up. So my kids were competing and they were good athletes, and I wanted to be able to go to their games and kiss them goodnight. So my wife and I looked for a business we could get into, and we had explored restaurants, we'd explored creative shops, we'd explored a lot of different things. And we had an uncle who was a college counselor, and he had joined a barter company, and he traded his college counseling, financial aid counseling services. And every year, he would do 4 or 5 kids through barter, which would, because of the barter money earned, and we'll talk about this more, I'd imagine, he would be able to pay for his landscaping and his dinners out because his wife didn't cook, and be able to pay to fix his car and pay for his, all the different things in his life. But what was fascinating to my wife, who was my business partner, and I, is that he would get 5 or 6 referrals from each kid because he was really, really good at what he did. So he built this massive college counseling business, with the only marketing he ever did was joining a barter exchange. And it led to so much word of mouth referrals, which any small business owner will tell you is their lifeblood. That each year the 5 that referred him referred 20 more, and those 20 referred 20 more, and he ended up leaving being a principal of a school to 100% focus on his college counseling business. So we found it to be a really interesting way to innovative approach to marketing and growing your business. And so we flew out to Cleveland and spent a week with the barter trainer, and we learned most of what we needed to know, and came back and launched the business 17 years ago. And the rest is history. We just sold it, or merged it into a much larger barter company a few months ago, where I'm now actively involved as a vice president, and working on that business. But also, my wife, who was my business partner, is not. She's now
You
freed
freed her.
from freed from the tyranny of day-to-day business, so now she can continue to be the local politician she is.
I often
So
say the 5-year plan that usually takes 15 years. And Kevin, you just represented it very well.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's amazing how time flies. If anybody told me we were in business for 17 years, it seemed like 17 minutes. It just time goes fast. When you are approaching Social Security. So enjoy it while you're young, my friend. Enjoy it while you're young.
Sage advice.
Now,
Uh,
now
so
my son's about to be gone from, hitting a baseball really far and an offensive lineman to graduating law school. So it's a quick journey.
yeah, we don't control it and it moves very fast.
Yeah.
Uh, so in that 17-year period, was the
Hmm.
idea like I'm out of advertising, I'm out of marketing. Um, we're going to start this venture together, husband and wife duo. 5 years, let's give it 5 years, turns into 17. Did you start it with the intention to sell it, or what was
No,
the
no, not
reason?
really. No, not really. We started it to make a living and be able to support our, Westchester County, New York lifestyle, and send our kids to college. And turns out that starting your own business right before applying for college financial aid is a really good idea because they really look at your W-2s. And when you're new to business, the W-2 isn't reading much, right? So that's, if I could impart anything to your future listeners, it's that there are a lot of different elements to your fiscal picture. And you can really, it's really about uh, cash flow and money flow through your business, through your personal life, and where do you make money in places that you didn't expect money, like something like financial aid. And there's a much bigger picture than simply I've started this business and what can I pay myself?
Oftentimes people go, well, I pay myself through the distributions of the business. And I go, well, a lot of the places you're going to want to get financial aid for your kids, a lot of things that you're going to want to establish that are in our society require to see the money in various ways and shapes. So there's a lot of things that you should do to prep that. When did you start thinking you could sell the business?
Well, it's an
6 months
interesting,
ago?
no, it's a very small industry, the retail barter industry. There are probably, I would say, 300 active retail barter exchanges around the country. Some of them are much bigger entities, and we had been approached about selling many, many times, but people, bring it up, but when it comes time to talk about money, they don't have it. So, it's interesting when you own a barter company, it's like owning a bank. You have obligations to people. They have trade credit that they expect to be fulfilled. They have debt to the exchange that they expect to repay. So it's almost like a bank. You can't just shut a bank and tell everybody, yeah, you're out of luck. So over time, you're always looking for a high integrity operator. You're looking for people who you can entrust the members and the relationships that you've built to. So a lot of the people who approached us over the years didn't fulfill those categories. And then somebody approached us within the last year who did fulfill those categories. They probably approached us several years earlier than I would hope that it would have happened, but you don't know what's going to happen down the road with them, with offers, with opportunity. So you have to decide: do you strike now while the iron's hot, or do you wait? And, that's the challenge to any business owner is you know making a decision and living by it.
I heard you say, which I think applies as sage advice for a lot of businesses, as you're operating, especially if you've done it for longer than a decade, you're getting queries. You're getting people knocking on your door saying, "Have you thought about selling?" And whether or not it materializes, you take those conversations and kind of see where they go. But ultimately, it's about the fit. It's ultimately about the
Always.
stakeholders, your clients, the obligations you have in finding the right home. Because when someone buys your company, what are companies? They're systems that operate, but that system has to operate in the buyer and has to be a good fit for it. What were some of them? You listed bits of it, but what were some of the things you were really focused on in those first interactions with what you thought was the right buyer?
Well, I really was looking for the right people who share my philosophy. I like to, call myself a high integrity operator. I try to make sure, I police our exchange and make sure everybody's trading fairly, equitably. They're fulfilling their obligation to the exchange. If they're not, we'll ask them or tell them that they're no longer part of, what amounts to a private membership club as a business. And if you can't fulfill your obligations, I'm not your cash broker. I'm not here to get you cash business. I'm here to get you barter business, and then turn that barter business into your marketing and have that marketing earn your cash business, or turn it into word of mouth referrals. So you have to be very clear with your members. So was looking for somebody who shared the same passion about that. I was also looking for people who weren't arrogant. I was looking for people who, had a sense of humor, who understood where, bartering services to grow our businesses. We're not committing, um, you know, um, brain surgery. we we can go do this. We can go make money. We can do it with a smile on our faces and a warmth in our hearts, and do a really good job. And everything, all the financial success will follow from having a great outlook. And so people like that are hard to find, my friend. As you can, you interview a lot of people. They're very hard to find. People get caught up in their own arrogance of their success. And the truth of the matter is, it's very, very fleeting. Your health is fleeting. Your life is fleeting. The span of your career. Did anybody tell you when you were 21 years old, graduating college, that you've got about 20 really good corporate years of earning before they're going to start calling you old and starting to want to let you go and hire somebody cheaper and younger? Nobody tells you that, but you find out. Doesn't
Yeah,
happen to everyone, but
the countdown.
the advertising business is a very young business. All the kids in buying, media buying, now it's digital media buying at the ad agencies. You
Yeah,
don't find many people who make it to 50. Very,
yeah,
very few. And all of my contemporaries and all of my rabbis in that business over the years, are all done with
yeah.
their careers. Fortunately, they all did really well, so they're fine with it. But I literally have one friend left in the business who's still plugging along. Everybody else has been let go or merged out or bought out. So,
And
and
you highlight something that is not often stated, which is there's this career period, this professional period where you can really earn in a category of your interest. So like in the advertising industry and the marketing industry, but what's happening next, right? You're not just going to go sit on a beach somewhere. You're not just going to go off and be stagnant. You're from a vibrant industry that works the mind. So you're not going to twiddle your thumbs. You're going to do another venture. You're going to do the next business that utilizes this. Just so I can bridge it for a variety of different audience members, what did you use from your talents in advertising to entrepreneurship? Like what were the talents that migrated best for you?
well, in our particular business, the retail barter business, a lot of what people want to trade for is marketing. So local marketing is a little different than, the national market used to do. But at the end of the day, you want a strong website, you want search engine optimization, you want social media marketing, you want to pick, the media that are right for you. You want a clear brand message, you want good brand communications. And because I could talk to these small business owners about this in a way that they, need expertise. I always say somebody who's great at HVAC isn't great at marketing, but they need it and they don't have time for it. So by being in business with me, I can worry about that part of their business. And by finding them incremental customers that lead to word of mouth referrals, they can use that incremental business to pay for it. So they're not really laying out to pay for it. So it's a win-win for everyone. So being a marketing professional really serves well in the barter industry. Um, and then the other thing too is I, spent many, many years selling for ABC and CBS and Fox. And when you go out and you talk to members, prospects, future members, you're selling. You're convincing them to come do business with you in a currency that you've created, and getting them to sign paperwork, agreeing to abide by the rules. And so you're always pitching, you're always closing, you're always doing the things that you learned to do over the years as a professional sales rep. You're smiling. It's
Uh, it's
because you thought always be closing,
it's
right?
yeah, a little bit of Glengarry there, but the the application, I often uh, exaggerate it just to try to overemphasize, but the skill sets that are developed in the industry of advertising, marketing, then you apply selling, persuasion, and the grit needed to do that repeatedly. Those two transfer to so many entrepreneurial ventures. It's one of the most powerful skill sets you can apply to grow businesses and have positive influences. You're using it in the barter category, but I can tell, Kevin, you would have used those same skills in any business that you launch, whether it be HVAC, roofing, logistics, right? It is a skill set of how to help people get customers and communicate and understand what they need. And they make you pretty good at doing deals, by the way. So let's talk about the deal. You finally got someone knock on the door who you thought was a legitimate opportunity for the company. And
Mhm.
how did they approach you? Was it cold outreach, networking event? How did that conversation start?
Yeah, I told you it's a small business, the barter business, so everybody knows each other. And I had heard of them. So when he called and left me a message, I was more than happy to call him back. We cross trade between exchanges, so it's always good to have. We are sort of known as Switzerland amongst barter companies because we get along with everybody. They're going back past when we started 17 years ago. There's a million grudges from the old days, and it's like we have nothing to do with any grudges. So people need to trade, two people who won't talk to each other will trade through us because we talk to everybody. So anyway, so it was
Says more
not
about you than
unusual.
the industry, by the way, because Kevin, I think that's partly your disposition over the
Well,
industry's disposition.
it could be, but I just don't, like I said, we're not reconnecting neurons in the mind. We're trading to help businesses grow. It's like smile, deal with it, just move on. So
So was it explicit? Was it a phone call that said, Kevin, we see you, we know each other, we've done stuff together. Have you thought about being acquired or when you're going to sell
yeah,
or exit? Was it explicit?
yeah, he asked you, are you interested? And we talked and introduced ourselves and talked about, our businesses, and then asked if I had ever considered selling. You'd heard a lot about me and knew I was a high integrity operator, which is what they wanted to, buy. And asked if I had any, interest in selling. And I told him, you're a little early. I would like to sell this in a few years, but right now this is how I make a living. But I don't want to say no because only fools say no without listening. And he did something which was very interesting because I think one of the challenges that people have with selling their business is what is it worth? What's the value of the business? So I kept asking him, how are you going to value me? What do you think it's worth? And of course, he's negotiating. So he's not going to say that. And he said, you know what, Kevin, I've learned by acquiring other companies, you know what you're worth? You're worth what you're willing to sell for. So what you need to do is tell me, what are you willing to sell for? And let's take it from there. And it was brilliant. It was like, what do I need to leave this business, remove ownership and give it, put it in somebody else's hands and yet move off into, another direction. And, my wife, Karen, and I gave it a lot of thought. And we came up with some terms and conditions that would work for us. Um, and none of them were met with sneers or revulsion. They were all like, we can do that, this, the other thing, but there are a couple of things that we need to work on, and it just evolved. And the more I realized his plan for world domination of in the retail barter business, the more excited I was because look, I would be one of the first 5 employees on a business that's going to eventually be enormous and control the business. I hope. no, be one of three or four companies that really control the business. So, it's great to get a new career opportunity at my age. And
Fun.
they treat me like an operator, not like an employee. And I like that. I like having, my one of my biggest problems were with corporate America, and it happened over and over again, is they spend a lot of money to bring you in because of your experience and your gravitas and your background, and you give them advice and they don't listen to you. It's like, why are you paying me so much for advice and then not
Yeah.
listen to any of it?
And then
Because
replace you with
everybody's
young folk.
right, and everybody's smarter than you. Everybody knows
Yeah.
better, even though you've just been through it all.
Yeah.
And so after a while, after 20 years, 25 years of dealing with the same nonsense, you begin to realize that I want to put myself in a position where the only asshole I have to listen to is myself. So pardon my French, and the only, and when I make a mistake, I want to make a mistake based on my own wisdom, not on somebody else's ego.
Yeah.
So
You
uh,
cover so many helpful things in that. I want to unpack a few. One, a good buyer, qualified buyer who's done deals before says, my job is to give you, Kevin, what you want in a way that I can quantify a multiple of return. Like it's got to fit our vision. So tell me what you want and I'll do my best to give it to you. And I'll tell you where I can't. And a lot of people who are approached are waiting for who's going to make the first move. What was the offer they're going to give me for my business? And your ability to help gain understanding of the greater vision that they have, how you can contribute to it, and then what you need to be satisfied to make a deal happen is a real mature approach to deals. And so kudos to you for doing that. That's
well,
a
thank you.
very important skill set that a lot of people aren't prepared to do. You have we said this before we started, a powerhouse spouse. You have some you are a powerhouse, but you also have a better half, a spouse that contributed to thinking through this opportunity, and she was leaving, right, and you were staying.
Right.
So, how did that household conversation go? How did you two discuss the future, especially since you've been working together for 17 years?
Well, it's interesting. When you call her a powerhouse spouse, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but I will say that, uh, almost 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, my wife had been a trustee on our village board for many years, and they asked her to run for mayor. So she ran for mayor and was elected in a landslide, and was just reelected again. So my wife kind of found out what she's really, really passionate about at a very advanced age. And it's so interesting because when you look at running a town or being part of a board that runs a town, um, what are you really doing? You're talking to local constituents who have an issue for one reason or another with somebody else in town, some town ordinance, some town ruling, and they're annoyed, disappointed, overwhelmed, whatever the word you want to choose with these things. And you need to find a way to create common ground between
Yeah.
the person, the legislation, whatever it is that they're upset with, and trying to get them to where they need to be happy and satisfied. It's mediating. And that's all you do with the barter exchange is you mediate. You're constantly making sure everybody treats each other fairly, finding a common ground, finding a mediation where everybody feels fair. So it turns out that if you want to run for mayor, owning a barter company is an incredible training ground. And my wife, who puts together, because a lot of times, when you're in on boards, or you work in um, volunteerism, whatever, people are sitting to me and they say, you know what we should do? You know what we should do? And it always drove me crazy because when I served on boards, and I've served on a bunch of them, we is us. So what you're saying is, you know what I should do when you can say this is what I should do, and you can lay out a roadmap of how we're going to get there, then talk. Otherwise, spare us all your wisdom because we're the ones who are going to do the work. So a lot of times with running a town, it's very similar. You know what we should do, but a lot of times you can't help somebody, but what you can do is put them in touch with somebody who can help them. So it's really networking and connecting people. So it's really managing and politics is really so similar to running a business, especially a small business. Um, Mind blowing. So anyway, yeah, she's a little powerhouse running a little village in Westchester County with a $35 million budget, and she does an amazing job and was just
That's
reelected to show for it. So
that's
the
amazing. It's
that was a
fun too. That's
long-winded way of in the house. It was like, Kevin, get the deal done. I want out. So that was what was going on in the house. You know, she also one of her, and I'm sorry I'm going on at such length,
no,
but
it's
one of
great.
her main
It's great
jobs
context.
one of her main jobs with Hudson Barter Exchange, as it was handling all the bookkeeping, accounting, evaluating, inventories, and she really uh, helped. Besides selling and marketing, which she helped me with, that was really her core focus. And so when it came time to sell, she was really concerned,
Yeah,
because you know you know it's
she knows
like,
she knows all the details.
yeah, the values in the balance sheet, right?
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
you're not doing your balance sheet right, if you're not doing your QuickBooks right, it makes it much tougher to sell. So if I had any advice for people, is like for the people who are just doing QuickBooks on a columnar pad still, or trying to do it on their own, hire a professional bookkeeper and accountant to do it. Because at the end of the day, when you press send, when they get something that really is well thought out and everything's in the right silos, it's going to make it a lot easier to evaluate what you want for your company.
When you have the most important participant in a deal, which is the bookkeeper, with good books, it's so much easier to transact. It's so much easier to understand the business too.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely. And
and
they look at
you're
and they look at things I wouldn't even know to look at.
give
So
an
they
example. This is helpful for the audience.
well, they want to see, your expired inventory number. Um, how much did you write off an expired inventory? Well, when you buy, a lot of tickets on barter and you do big trades, a lot of times you end up with theater tickets that didn't sell. So they're expired inventory. So they place a value on that in the overall process of how transactional is this exchange. They want to see they want to see the trading velocity, which is not necessarily from your QuickBooks, but from your software. So there are things that they're going to use to evaluate that you're not even sure about because you've never been an acquirer. You're the acquired.
Yep. Yeah, and convert those into things that are common in every business is aging AR. They want to see how you write off clients that don't pay you or customers that haven't paid. They want to see the utilization of service resources or teams or inventories. Like there's a lot of things that are just not in QuickBooks or in these chart of accounts that you have to measure and be prepared to explain and present. So
Yep.
really important bits to understand about the business, and especially if you're approached early, like you were, you may or may not be fully prepared. And I've consistently evangelized, always be ready to sell. Opportunity knocks every other week, but we don't take it because we're not ready for it. And it takes some leaps and bounds in order for us to sometimes get a deal done. So from they reach out and say, hey, Kevin, have you thought about selling? Thought about the next thing for the business and what we can do together? Here's our vision. From that initial conversation, how long did it take to get to offer, to a formal LOI?
And what's an extension of what you just said is when you have all those, you have everything buttoned up and you're always ready to sell, you're also always ready to buy because you know exactly where you stand, what you can afford, what you can do, how you can extend yourself. So it works in both directions. So it's pretty important stuff to make sure that your books are in order so you can spring to action when an opportunity comes around.
100%. 100%. I will have trouble recapping the amount of sage advice and tidbits you shared at the end of this.
I appreciate it.
It's so much, Kevin. Uh, LOI, how first conversation, I like to call it like the early dating and flirting stage, right?
Mhm.
Where we're talking about what we're going to be together and how much fun this is. So here's the first offer. How long did that take? Was it weeks, months,
Um,
days?
yeah, we he went away and didn't come back for a few months, and then I took a few months to come up with what I want to do. So I would say it was really about a year before we really got serious about it. And then from the time we got serious about it and kind of came to agreement, it took another 6 months for the lawyers and accountants to work it all out. And, God, it took forever to just deal with something that a certificate you needed from the state. So that's another thing that, is, and most small business owners, and, I say this with all the love in my heart, um, I'm so thrilled I never have to fire another idiot because they didn't show up for work or turn out to be a drug addict. And I'm so excited I never have to deal with the IRS or local government again or the federal government to get certificates and authorizations and approvals and things that, God, they spend a lot of time standing in your way. Just your just your we just got an insurance audit for um, our employee compensation thing. It took us almost 3/4 of a day yesterday to give the insurance company everything they needed to prove to them that we had, our employees and how much do they make and what, get them all their documentation. And it's just ridiculous. They make it so hard to run your own business in this world. So it's not for the faint of heart and it's not for the impatient. So,
Yeah. And then to consider it, there comes a time in your life where you're like, it makes more sense to bolt on what I have into the next journey, let them be burdened with all the business stuff, and let me
right.
do the things that I want to do. Um, how close was the initial offer to what you ended with? Was it close, or was there a lot of negotiation? Was there a lot of nitpicking? Explain a little bit of that process.
Um, it was reasonably close. I mean, I think I ended up getting, 90% of what I asked for. There were 10% were unreasonable, not unreasonable, but untenable things for them and their business vision. Yeah, so about 90% came through. But I was also, you know, you know, it's interesting. You need to look at the world through two lenses, the one that you have and the one that the acquirer has. And I know what he was going to be willing to do. I know what he wasn't going to be willing. I know what was, being greedy pig was, and that wasn't going to work. So if I was going to send that message to him that I wanted to be a greedy pig about what my exchange was worth, then what was I saying yes for in the first place? So once I said yes, let's do this, I wasn't looking to waste his time. So it was in a format and in a way that we had discussed that they could handle and do. And it was just a matter of putting numbers to it. So it was pretty close.
That's great. And it's not always common that you get 90% of what you want, but he approached you the right way. He said, Kevin, what is it that you want as a seller? And let me do my best to give it to you, versus you being all cagey and not telling him what you want because you think it's
Right.
going to be used against you in some way. But then if you think that's the case, if you think it's going to be used as a weapon in the deal, how are you agreeing on a future that's positive, right? If this is how the relationship is going to start through this transaction, it's telling you a lot about what it's potentially going to look like after.
Exactly.
Um, and so
Exactly.
being open-minded and being honorable and empathizing with the buyer, which a lot of people don't get as advice, is so helpful, right? To put yourself in their shoes about what they're trying to build and how you fit into it. Do you think it was an advantage being the fourth acquisition for them? Like they had figured some things out that made this easier?
Only from the perspective that they were unafraid, and we had talked about acquiring other exchanges all along the way, and we probably did it out of fear, out of, we didn't know what to expect, we didn't know how to value them, we didn't know what to do, we didn't know how to go about it, we didn't want to assume the legal expense. There were, you know, excuse me, so many excuses as to why we didn't expand our business through the same means. And then you get old. Then you get older and you realize I don't really want to all the aggravation of acquiring. But they're young and they're energetic and they have all the, fire and energy and vim and vigor that we had when we first started. And so, we put them in a position to use us along with their other exchanges to go forward and really kick some butt. So,
Growing through
yeah,
acquisitions.
it's fear. It's fear,
Yeah.
it's lack of confidence in what you can handle, which is funny because I walked away from, very lucrative corporate jobs to start a crazy business when everybody was like, you're starting what? I wasn't fearful then, but I
Isn't
always
it
say
the
about
truth?
it is
Wow.
true.
Yeah. You,
It is.
you're not afraid of entrepreneurship and getting punched in the face at your discretion. And then when it comes to growing through an acquisition strategy, there's just something that holds people back, right? There's no reason why you couldn't have done an acquisition to grow the company before you got acquired.
Right.
It's accessible to all businesses of all sizes. And I am a proponent of growing through acquisitions and in figuring out partnerships that make sense and merging with them. It's such a easier way to carry the load of the business itself. And then the first real transaction you do is when you get acquired. And thankfully, you found a great home. What other contributors were involved in the deal? So you had potentially the accounting side, you had the lawyers, and what did their involvement have as a consequence or as an impediment to getting it done that maybe you and the buyer had to go work out?
I would say that your accounting uh, advice is one of the most important elements because it's not what earn, it's what you keep, and when you own a business that has seven different currencies in it because you're working with electronic currency, not cryptocurrency. We're not a crypto exchange where everybody has their own electronic trade credit. So we have reciprocal agreements with different people. You have to make sure that you are aware of what all your tax obligations are gonna be, and make sure that you have advantages, and make sure that you're not all of a sudden going to do this deal and find out, well, you need to write the government this check. You better know in advance, so because it can really kill a deal. So
The government
anyway,
can.
that was right. But by the same token, accountants tend to be really conservative and worried about every little thing for you, which is why you pay them. So sometimes they can talk you out of things too. So while you need to follow their advice in terms of your obligations, liabilities, you also can't let them convince you that you don't have certain values just based on the textbook. So it's a double-edged sword with your accountant. I think it's the most important thing you need to do, but I also think it was one of our biggest negatives that we had to overcome because it was not the accounting firm, the 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 thought of some of the obligations we had, and it turns out we worked them out. We worked them out. So you take care of the government, they take care of you, right?
We hope
So
most of the time.
right.
um, you you shared with us that you don't worry about the things that your acquirer is not. What does that mean?
Again, there are things that you look at in your books that you're like, well, not going to make them happy, and that's not going to make them happy. Turned out at the end of the day, they didn't even look at it. They didn't even care. What does an acquirer care about? The acquirer cares about how much money you bring in. That's what they care about. How much revenue are you doing? What's your profitability? And how much profit can they add to their bottom line based on their acquisition of you? That's what they care about. The rest of it is accounting magic. That's what you pay accountants for. So,
Yeah.
um,
How
yeah.
much of your role in the company factored into the deal? Because you're coming in as kind of almost you said an early employee into this bigger vision through this deal to some degree. How much did that lean into doing this transaction? If that wasn't available, would you have done it? And then what did you like about it?
Um, would I have done it without that? Maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm still pretty young. I'm not ready to, hang them up. But like you said, I have sales skills. So when you aren't afraid to sell, there's always somebody who's willing to give you a job. But I didn't really want to go be a, sales rep for somebody, So it was pretty important that there was a good role. And I also I have operated in the barter space for much longer than the acquirer. So they were thrilled to have my experience, wisdom. I was talking to them about things that we've done over the years that they haven't. And so every time they were just so appreciative and so excited about it. It just all felt right. It was just all really good.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
Was there a time in the deal at all that there was something that could kill it?
No, not really. No. Well, not unless once it was all agreed to, they had to look at my books. And that could have killed it, but the book said what I told them it said. So if you don't lie about who you are and you
It's
have good,
amazing how
yeah,
common
it's
sense
amazing.
and being good humans can like make these things easier, right?
Right. When I transfer my accounting to their financial people, and it says what I told them it said, it went pretty easily. So no, there was really not much that could have killed it. I mean, there were a couple of times where I was sort of like, what am I doing? Why am I getting out of this? It's I built a brand called the Hudson Barter Exchange, my wife and I, and it's pretty well known throughout the Hudson Valley. And we spent a lot of time from day one creating the logo, which I love, to creating a mystique around it. And it was not easy having it all go bye bye. It's there's a lot of melancholy about it being gone because it no longer exists. And now my corporation is the Hudson Trade Network, but we've sold off the assets of the Hudson Barter Exchange to Barter Saves. And so, giving up my URL, giving up my website hosting, all those things was sort of like shutting it down. We're quite sad and difficult to do, but oh well. It's like selling the house you grew up with. At the end of the day, it's just lodging, you know?
Yeah, it's just an asset at the end of the day, right?
Exactly.
Talk about that void a little bit more. Oftentimes you get into regret. There's uncertainty, right? Transferring this business you put blood, sweat, and years to build is an emotional one. It's very, very hard to approach it in a cold transactional kind of way for a lot of people, and
Hmm.
then say goodbye to this version of you that is a significant. I mean, it's an adult child, 17 years, right? You basically grew a whole business like you grew another human. So, um, what type of emotions did you covered a few of it, but like share a little more. Like, what did that look like? Did you ever doubt like you should move forward? What were some of the fears that came up of saying, "Wow, this is gone, and the future is unknown"?
Honestly, it was sad to give up a brand that had a presence that we worked so hard to build. But by the same token, if I told you stories that I had with employees, with staff, oh God, I just couldn't take it anymore. and now you bring in young people who you don't even speak the same language. Like I'm still figuring out how I'm gonna suss my stuff. I just heard a new one yesterday. It's uh, situational. I kid it, whatever. It was just time. It was time to move on. I didn't want to deal with all of the constraints and challenges that the government, the IRS, you go into have a really productive day at work. You open your mailbox, you have a letter from the IRS, and next thing you know, you're spending your whole day doing something that you had no intention of doing. And it was so incredibly unproductive. And it was mostly pulling together old documents to prove that what you filed was correct. And there's just so little competence in this world that let it be somebody else's problem. Let hiring people be somebody else's problem. Let firing people, when you hire somebody and then you fire them through COVID, you owe them 54 weeks of unemployment. It's like, Jesus, I'm still paying this person. And well, not because, you know, why? Why am I still paying them 54 weeks later? So, every business owner deals with the same stuff. And as the job market has gotten more and more challenging, less and less people out of work. It's harder and harder to hire morons.
Yeah. And
Because that's what's left.
and at a certain point, it's like you've already done your time.
Yeah.
You let the next group who wants to ambitiously fight the headwinds before them do it, and let's help them do it by contributing. So you get this deal, you get this ideal scenario of a buyer who's accepting of you, sees your contribution and what they're building as a vision. You can reinforce it with your experience. This positive next level for you, and you get this agreement. 70 pages, 80 pages. I don't know how long yours was, but this long purchase definitive agreement, the agreement that is going to be you signing away the brand that you built. And the back and forths are done. The red lines are done. All the numbers are accurate. What was that signing like for you?
By 3:30 in the afternoon, we were both so hungry. It's like, sign the damn thing so we can go to lunch. It's the little things, right? You gotta eat.
Gotta
You
eat.
gotta eat. So yeah, but I know what you mean. It was, when we woke up that morning, it was like, oh my God, today's the day. you know and again, it was melancholy, but we knew it was right, or we felt that we had put ourselves in a position where everything seemed right, and I could have turned out to be completely wrong. But I did a lot of due diligence. I asked a lot of people about the people we were selling to. I asked a lot of people about the exchange we were merging into. I had spent a lot of time with the owner. We went down, we had dinner with them and talked to them about not only their private life of, raising their children and their philosophy on that, but also what their vision was for the future of the exchange. And, we did everything we could to make sure that we felt really comfortable. So when it came time to finalize it, we were a little sad, we were a little forlorn, but we just did it. And that was that. Next.
Any relief?
A little relief. There was a little relief that we didn't have to at the end of the day, when there's a major problem, it's not my problem anymore. So, and it's a business filled with problems. We traded a bunch of monitors. One arrived at somebody's place and it was cracked, and they were really irate. But sorry, we don't control the shipping company. But it's like, here, call them. It's not my problem.
And that's small business, right? A small business is just taking ownership of all the problems, and from those making opportunities. But doing that for a long period of time becomes exhausting. So the ability to take the thing you built and get value for it, right? Get an opportunity from it, is significant, because a lot of companies, Kevin, don't actually sell. A lot of founders give up or get frustrated because of all those things you walk through as horror stories of employment, customer stories of damage and stress, and some just get to a point where they're done. And they didn't find, like, you happen to find a really good buyer and a good fit and a good story, and then others just got approached but never found that one. Um,
Well, I can tell
so
you one of the best parts is, the 25, it's the barter exchange, we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small businesses as members. And so I can't tell you, no less than 20 different business owners said to me, "Oh man, I'm so jealous. That's exactly what I want to do, is find somebody to take over my business and let me just, ride along and be part of it, but take over all the headaches, And so a lot of people were really, in admiration, were jealous, and that made me feel really good about it, because it just makes you feel like you did the right thing. But it's interesting that we deal with all business owners, and they all have the same challenges, which are all the things I talked about. But what's so interesting to me is we deal with a lot of media, and we talk to a lot of people who are getting involved in new businesses, and it's so interesting to me that people have an incredible number of skill sets, and usually one that they're really, really good at. And the one skill set that a lot of business owners who are going into business don't have is being skilled salespeople. And especially when you're starting a magazine or a newspaper. I know somebody who just took over two magazines for somebody. And I said to the owner, I'm like, does she realize that she's only going to be successful if she goes walking into store owners and saying, "Hey, advertise in my magazine"? And, like, because she was a graphic designer. Yeah. What does a graphic designer know about, banging on doors and closing deals? And people always underestimate the sales rep, the revenue generation person. And it's critical to your company. And both my wife and I were long-term sales reps. And so it helped grow a business.
the best people to go out and buy companies are people who have sales experience. The number one transfer of succession, the number one probability of positive succession, is the next acquirer, the next buyer, the next leader have sales experience.
Interesting.
Because at the end of the day, the thing that cures problems is revenue. If you
Right.
can generate sales, you can get new business in, you can solve a lot of problems with the revenue and sales you generate. If you're the doer, if you're the producer and you hit problems and you can't make that revenue, that's when you drown. So yeah, you have, it's also not very common to have two significant others who are capable of selling. One that can sell and mediate a town, and the other one that can traverse small businesses and bartering. You two are probably the most connected folks to have at a dinner party. You're going to make everyone get along quite well. Um, but congratulations to you, Kevin, because that's uh, I've unfortunately had the depressing conversation with a lot of people where their last deal as a salesperson wasn't their best deal. And it sounds like what you built in your company opened a great next thing for you. And I wish that for a lot of the listeners. I wish that for a lot of the small businesses, because the kids ain't taking over the company. The
Right.
like
Right.
you gotta have an option for where this thing is going to go, because dying at your desk should not be the only option for your company.
Right.
So I really appreciate the advice you've given. I'd like to kind of encapsulate it into some lessons as we finish off here. Kevin, you're invited to dinner at your own house. You went back in time. I will give some context, but you've been invited to dinner and you're giving yourself advice. What are the top hits? What are those greatest hits of advice you want to make sure Kevin, who is about to sell his company, has his wisdom?
Well, first of all, I would always put my wife and I in the middle of the table. Do you ever see that Seinfeld?
Yes,
They make poor middles. Karen and I make really good middles. So,
noted.
uh,
Just so Kevin, if when I'm in your neck of the woods, I know where to place you.
I guess the advice I would really give people is um, don't overestimate your importance and don't overstay your welcome. If you feel like it might be time, it probably is. And once somebody else acquires your company, your name will be gone, off the door, out of the picture. Your clients, your customers will talk to the next owner because they really were a customer of your company because they liked your business, not because they liked you. No matter how much you convince yourself they liked you, the truth of the matter is they were doing it because they liked your business and that your business did something for them that was valuable to them. So don't overestimate your importance. Check your ego at the door. And if you think it's time, it probably is what I would say.
Fantastic. Kevin, thank you so much for
My pleasure,
sharing
Peter.
this valuable message to people who need it. If someone has questions, you come across so giving. Are they able to reach out to you
Of course.
and ask you questions? And what's the best way to do so?
I'm available at kevin.brown at bartersaves.com. So that's kevin.brown at bartersaves.com. And a good salesman always says things twice, including their phone number, right? So the first trick you learn. So
Habits you will never, ever lose.
the first time they're reaching for the pencil, the second time they got you. So
Kevin, thank you
anyway,
so much.
Peter, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, Kevin, for joining us on today's episode of Agency Acquisitions and Exits. And thank you for being a listener. You can find us on Spotify and YouTube. Click that like or subscribe button. Give us a follow. We post stories of industry experts about how they sold or acquired to grow. If you or someone you know should be on the next show to talk about your story, send us an email or leave us a note in the comments. We'd love to talk to you. As always, thank you for listening. We appreciate you. Stay safe.